So we start right away with Evans Mensah. So you and your team, so Evans is head of the political desk here at Multimedia. You and your team have done a comprehensive, complete analysis overview of the NPP and NDC manifestos. First, how do the numbers game come at you when you start from that premise? The NDC 617 and the NPP 143 promises.
I mean, very interesting analysis. When you begin to break it down into the numbers, you see what the trends are and what the parties are seeking to do. So just what you said alone tells you a story. So for NPP, when they were seeking to come into power in 2016 in opposition, Imani had counted 510. After being in government for 4 years, the promises drastically reduced to 143. That tells you a story. Two things I've learned doing this manifesto analysis the last few weeks: that when you are in opposition, you are pretty unrestricted in terms of the number of promises you can make. But when you get into government, you seem to be checked one by you get the sense of trying to consolidate what you did over the last year. So necessarily into a reduction in the number. That doesn't necessarily for the NDC necessarily. If you look at the numbers, so let's think to the NDC because theirs is the latest. You've mentioned we counted 617 promises in the NDC manifesto this year.
All right. I think we should sort out Evans Mensah's line and get him back because it's very, very important. It's very important to begin the analysis from where he takes us, looking at the big picture as regards the documents in their entirety. And they have done the numbers and also checked repeated promises, similar promises, promises that have not been fulfilled since the last 3 election contests. The parties seem to repeat some of their promises. Some of them have had the opportunity of making a promise. They come into government and they finish a 4 cycle of 2 terms and don't fulfill it. And then they bring it back. We want to do this. So questions of credibility. How can we trust that you do something that you promised once and never did when you got the opportunity to do it? Yes, so Evans, your line was breaking. So if you can start, really, just start all over again.
Okay, great. I don't know if it's better now. It's better, Samson?
It's good.
Fantastic. So I was saying, if you look at let's start with the numbers, NDC, NPP. NPP in opposition had 510 according to money. We counted in the 2020 manifesto 143. What it tells you is 2 things. When you're in opposition, you tend to be very unlimited, unrestricted in the number of promises you make because you want to win power, sometimes at all costs. But when you get into government, something else happens. 2 things. One is you either get reality check. Second, you also possibly want to consolidate the gains that you believe you've made over the last 4 years. So that necessarily then leads into a lower number of promises. My point is, if you do that analysis, it doesn't necessarily follow for the NDC though, because in the NDC's case, in 2020, they promised, as we've counted, 617 promises. But if you compare it to 2012, when John Mahama again was running as president after the unfortunate demise of Professor Mills, and 2016, when again they were in power, seeking to regain, the numbers don't follow in terms of the analysis that you come to. So in 2012, an incumbent party, they had 569 promises that we counted, right, in 2012, in their manifesto. In 2016, an incumbent party seeking re-election had 666 promises. Now, it then drops to 617 in 2020. That tells you a story. It's not something that you could really put a lot on, just to say that in terms of quantity, the NDC tend to promise far more than the NDC when it comes to sheer number of promises. But something, if you want to then go into breaking down sectorially, and I know you're going to do a bit of sectoral analysis, for the NDC, a very important story emerges. And the story of, and this is something that the Manifesto Committee Chairman, Professor Danso Boafo himself concedes to, a story of why they possibly lost the 2016 elections. Let's count the sectorial promises. So in education, in 2020, the NDC is promising, has 86 promises in education. But the place I want you to focus is what they are promising when it comes to social protection. Social protection is important. Why? This is NDC. It's a grassroots social democratic party. And in 2016, when they lost the election, guess how many promises they had on social protection? They had 10. 10. Now, you remember what has been said about how the NDC got disconnected from its social democratic base in 2016. In 2020, that has been rectified. Guess how many promises they are putting out now in social protection? As many as 82. In fact, it's the second most promises you find in the 2020 manifesto. Professor Boafo says, concedes that in 2016, they lost their way a bit in terms of what they are known for as a social democratic party. And that in crafting the manifesto, it reflected. They wanted to go back to that base and excite that base with policy interventions. And that is why we are seeing these huge numbers. I mean, I can go through for you the other key sectorial areas by sheer numbers. That then gives you, tell you where the party is focusing and putting a lot of the emphasis on. Another area you will talk about is health. Health has 67 promises. The third most promised sector is transport, roads, infrastructure. Isn't that quite instructive, knowing that the NDC believes one of its biggest, strongest points to be infrastructure?
Right.
And if you isolate infrastructure alone, they give you as many as 39 promises. So infrastructure, if you look at the entire infrastructure promises, that is in excess of 100. So it tells you that the NDC is pretty paying attention. They are playing to their strengths, what they believe to their strengths. One, infrastructure. Second, social protection.
Where you have trade and industry doing 67 and along with health, which is also 67. And yet, when you come to ICT, they have only 3 promises. And when you come to environment, science, and technology, they have only 3 promises. That's according to your analysis. Well, what does that say about them?
Well, but that is an interesting one. So if you look at the ICT, so you are isolating the pure ICT promises by themselves. It's 3. But what you will find overall is that there are elements of some form of technology, ICT, in some of the promises. In education, you'll find a bit of the ICT elements there. But when you isolate pure ICT promises, you count 3 of them. So you find it sort of in dotted across the places. When you lower it down to it in its purest sense, you have 3. What does it say about? And then you raise the issue about trade and industry. Trade and industry is 67, and tied with health in 4th place in terms of the most number of promises. I mean, in 4th place, it's not bad. The party is telling you that, trade and industry going forward is going to be important. As for ICT, they sort of spread it across almost all the areas have a certain element of it. So that again is what it tells me. Right. But what it says to you, so let me break it down. So you have the area with the most promise is education, followed in close place by social protection. In 3rd place is transport, roads, and infrastructure, and we know why that will be the case. And then tied in 4th place is trade and industry together with health. All have 67 promises. Of course, if you look at the other areas, ICT is important, but it's spread across the other areas. But if you look at it in the purest sense, it's 3. That should tell you a story.
What is the story when you compare the 86 promises in education against the NPP? How many in education?
Okay, I quickly need to pull up the NDC's education promise numbers for you. But if you do the, whilst I go to do that, if you do the pure analysis of the NDC's own education, if you just go back to 2012, remember 2012, that is when Nana Addo was pushing free SHS quite strongly, right?
Yep.
And and free SHS dominated the discussions. NDC had their own counter adverts about whether free SHS is possible or not. In that year, NDC actually reacted with the education promises at 75 promises they put in there. Now, come to 2016, when free SHS again was a big deal, it drops to 62 promises. But again, going into 2020, 2021, and beyond, where the NPP says they are consolidating in their NDC manifesto promises, the NDC is doing the very opposite of that and doing a serious number of promises in that. Why do I think that is? I think we've seen how the NPP believes free SHS is almost their trump card for the elections.
Right.
If that is the case, and we speak to most people in the markets, and we've been doing this thing we call voters' voice. If you go to the market, a lot of people say they'll vote for the NPP because of free SHS.
That's right.
The NDC wants to react to that. They don't want to see that space. And so they've come with a serious number of promises just in that particular area for 2021, 2020, 2024, going into that election. So I'll pull up for you what the NPP's is.
So do that.
Education shortly.
Do that quickly, and let's look briefly at the NPP in these terms as well. Don't forget that this show is brought to you by the kind sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Consolidated Bank Ghana, we stand with you. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. We lead, we build home for you. Star Assurance, your solid partner. And Rehoboth Properties. These are those paying for Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis platform. And we just started with some analysis of the numbers and looking back into comparative analysis of how the parties have done over a certain period as far as the numbers of the promises are concerned, and what for them represent their trump cards, and what the counter argument by each party is. And you just heard Evans Mensah, head of the political desk. And the political desk here at Multimedia has been doing a very thorough review of these manifestos. And thanks to Imani also assisting in this direction as well. And so every Wednesday, if you're looking for the best as far as getting to know everything, almost everything, in the minutest details, microscopic details of the manifestos of the two parties, your best bet is the PM Express on Wednesdays, hosted by Evans Mensah. Now, Evans, can we take a peek into the NPP and how it is also behaving as far as these numbers are concerned?
And I must quickly say that there's a gentleman, a GIG graduate called Evans Aziamo Mensah, who had been doing a lot of this with us, my assistant, poring over the numbers over the last few weeks, helping me analyze this data. And so great minds out there, very dedicated, looking into this. Shout outs to him, wherever he is. But let me quickly do that.
Of course, going into the elections, your election headquarters is the place. That's it.
Absolutely. So let's do the education. MPP 2020 Manifesto Education, 20 promises. Compared to the NDC's 86 promises. I mean, when you're in opposition, you can make a lot of promises. And I think my reading of what is happening with this is NDC wants to consolidate. They believe they've implemented the free SHS successfully. And so going into the next 4 years, there isn't much to do than to consolidate and enhance. But the NDC, having seen how people are reacting to the free SHS and possibly it being a trump card, don't want to see that space. And they are doing 86, but it's quite a huge difference in terms of the number there. What about health? Health was the leading area for the NPP at 22 promises. And that, for me, makes sense. This is coronavirus period. I mean, it's a season of a pandemic, and so that sort of was an important factor to them. Again, if you compare it to the NPP's promises, we are talking about a huge figure of 67 promises that they've put in health. And again, in all aspects of these key areas, the NDC is doing triple, sometimes 4 times more promises than the NPP is doing in their manifesto. Which other area will you talk about? If we talk about, say, infrastructure, which has been a big debate in the last few weeks, whilst the NDC is doing pure infrastructure at 60, infrastructure at 39 promises, the NPP is simply doing 7 promises. Again, a huge disparity there. Now, in NPP, social protection is just at 3. Social protection, 3. But if you go to the NDC, and I pointed this out earlier, they are doing 82. This is a social democratic party. Right. Why not? They lost its way, as the manifesto chairman had said. Now they are reconnecting back to that base and therefore putting a lot of... So that is the sort of comparison that you get. You get transport. Transport is also very important for the NPP. If you look at the broader context of 143 total, they have 20 promises for 2020, but the NDC, as I said earlier, is doing 68 promises. So you, in terms of the share numbers, you can't really compare in terms of the NDC's volumes to the MPPs. Right.
Evans, we can't thank you enough. Thank you very much, and we'll keep our channels and dials on PM Express.
If you want to do quickly, 1 second, repeat, because I think that is so important.
All right. Unfortunately, Evans is...
So just... Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you
hear me?
Yes.
Great. One thing that you'll be interested in something is that we counted 25 in terms of free promises that will be free.
Yeah, those free promises, right?
25 promises. Yes, and then look at something that I'm sure you interrogate. I know this is very important to you. The CRC recommendations, right?
Yep.
The repeated similar promises. In 2012, the NDC promised to implement the CRC recommendation, which they accepted in the white paper, of making the MMDC's position elected, right? They put it in their manifesto for 2012. They obviously couldn't do it. After 4 years, they brought it back in 2016, lost the elections with it. In 2012, 2020 is back. Another one is the payment of assembly members. Payment of assembly members.
Of course, making the MMDCs elective, they had a disagreement with the NPP as to the mode, the formula to go. The NPP wanted it to be partisan, and they were against making it a partisan election. So both parties, in principle, agree that we need to elect our DC, MMDCs, whatever. But how to do it has become the issue. Yes, the other point you were going to.
And a very, very final one I want to emphasize, but that was also a very controversial, popular one, the paying assembly members. Paying assembly members was first promised by John Mahama in 2012, in the 2012 manifesto. This is how they couched it. Assume responsibility for the payment of the remuneration of assembly members. Now, the question to ask, and we did ask this to the chairman of the manifesto committee, is they have 4 years to execute this particular promise. They did not do it. Guess what? In 2016, it was back. This is how they couched it in 2016 manifesto. Initiate processes to implement the Constitution Review Commission to pay assembly members allowed. They lost elections with that. And then 2020, it is back. It is a simple one-liner. Pay assembly members. Make of that what you will.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Evans Mensah. But just go over the freebies, the free things they want to do. The NDC is giving how many?
The NDC is giving us at least, we counted at least 25 promises that the NDC is promising to implement for free.
Okay. But we don't have the same featuring for the NPP?
Maybe we did not look at that.
All right. We know how sometimes how that happens. In the electioneering campaign frenzy, some of them out of emotions or out of spontaneous reaction, speaking to the crowds, will begin to talk about free that or free this. So we know that even beyond the manifestos, we are going to have them say a lot more of, I'll do this for free and do that for free. All right. Thank you very much, Evans Mensah, head of the political desk here at Multimedia. And thanks to you and your team for that very, very great job that you are doing as far as subjecting the manifestos to such, microscopic scrutiny and the repeated promises that Evans speaks about as well. It's an area that I have been very interested in following the job that Evans and the team have been doing as far as repetition of the promises are concerned. Constitution Review Commission, we spent $6 million for crying out loud to do a document for overhauling the Constitution. President Akufo-Addo promised, when he was a candidate, that he will overhaul the Constitution. He's become president. He's been handed a document that overhauls the Constitution. Unfortunately, there is disinterest. Nobody is implementing it. $6 million of our money gone into that document, and it's sitting there waste. We'll hold the politicians to task a lot more, and we know that the hunger zone will continue to attack us, but this is our job. We know it comes with it. The risk comes with it. Thank you. Now.